Y'all, it is my pleasure to introduce our second panel, Digital Spaces and Youth Identity Development. What is the role of digital technology in the lives of teenage youth? So as our youth, we're talking about the ways in which they kind of set the stage of how digital technology functions for them. We're gonna be talking with some scholars and practitioners about ways that they have seen and supported and done research around how identity development happens in these spaces. So I'm gonna invite our panelists and our moderator to come up and they will introduce themselves.
Hi.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Wade. I am an assistant professor here at UVA in the departments of Media Studies and African American Studies. I'm also the author of Black Girl Autopoetics, Agency in Everyday Digital Practice, which is based on my ethnographic research with Black girls in middle school and high school about the ways that they use social media to express themselves and also to engage in social discourse about everyday issues that they face.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Volpe. I'm an associate professor of psychology at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. I'm really excited to be on this panel. I direct and founded the Black Health Lab, which is focused on the ways in which structural systems of oppression, including racism and sexism, impact the lives and experiences of Black youth, especially Black young adults across the African diaspora, and the ways that they bring strengths and seek liberation in spite of those systems of oppression, and how that plays out in digital environments and technology, particularly social media.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Henry Willis, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Maryland, College Park, where I founded and direct the Cultural Resilience, Equity, and Technology Lab. And in our lab, we look at sociocultural risk and protective factors, specifically experiences of online racism and other experiences of racism, and how they impact youth development and mental health outcomes. And more importantly, we focus on resilience factors. So how do youth remain resilient in the face of racism-related stress? And finally, we explore how to use technology to increase access to mental health services and address some of the disparities we see in access to mental health treatments.
Hello everyone, my name is Sisitna Voduru. I'm a junior in high school up in Northern Virginia. I don't have as many decorations as the lovely professors over here, but I would like to share that I got a 5 on the AP Psych last year. Thank you.
Love that. Congrats. I never got a 5 on an AP test, let me tell you. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Alicia Hines, and I'm the Director of Research at the Center for Scholars and Storytellers at UCLA. Our mission is to unlock the power of storytelling to help the next generation thrive and grow. So we bring a lot of research-backed tools to storytellers, content creators. We work with a lot of production companies, studios, and things like that. And I'll talk a little bit more about our research, but really excited to be here. I was telling folks, like, is it over? Like, after the first amazing youth panel, it's like, do we have anything else to talk about? I don't know, but just excited to be here and learn from everyone. So thank you.
Okay, so we've each prepared a few slides to just give you some overview about the research and our findings. They'll be pretty quick, and then a video, I think. So we'll just do that quickly before we break out into the discussion. Okay, so forgive me while I navigate backwards and forwards. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want to give a shout out to my doctoral students, Ore Badajo and Melissa Holland, who prepared these infographics for us, 2 of them today, that give an overview of some of our findings. I'm not going to go into the specifics or the exact citations, but we have a QR code so you can access our website and you can look at all of the specifics there. So, of course, in my lab, we have found that there are several challenges that Black young adults face when going online. I mean, our work focuses predominantly on Black youth, right? So I'm going to talk about that in this context. But the youth panel already highlighted some of these. In our work, we're also really intersectional. So I'm going to be talking just about our findings specific to Black young adult women who face unique stressors. You might have heard of digital misogynoir, at the intersection of being Black women online and the negative messages and experiences that they might be especially susceptible to seeing. So here's just some examples. We found in our research that overwhelming amounts, right, percentages of Black young adult women that we surveyed are exposed to hateful content, especially hateful racial content online. They might be exposed to traumatic racial content online, which includes things like traumatic images of police brutality or immigrant detentions. And then we also find that a lot of them report being exposed to gendered racial online microaggressions. So not just online racism, as Dr. Willis mentioned, or online sexism, which target, of course, right, gender and race, but at that intersection, negative, hateful content specific to Black women and about Black women. And a lot of these are vicarious exposures, meaning they are not necessarily personally attacked, but they see these hateful messages as they're maybe doom scrolling or just scrolling in general through social media and other forms of online communication. And of course, these have impacts, right? Higher levels of stress, symptoms of depression, anxiety, poor sleep quality, and as well as we're finding increases in stress eating and other forms of harmful, stress-related behaviors. So this is the negative side of the coin. But we also know that Black young adult women agentically, as do other young adult users online, agentically and actively curate their social media and online content. They use these platforms to express themselves, to find community, as the youth panel already talked about a lot of these things, right? To explore their interests, to find community. So in work that we've done, we see they're using these platforms for also online social support, activism, engagement in civic engagement online, and they have positive experiences online as well, in addition to negative experiences. So we've actually found that some of these experiences lead to greater civic engagement. Positive interactions around race and gender online are also present, and we don't know enough about them, but we need to highlight both the positive and the negatives, including finding community, as Ashley kind of hinted at, right? Finding communities online that support, encourage, empower, sister circles, online hair communities for Black women. These are really important resources as they navigate what it means to them to be a Black woman in society. So I'll stop there, but here are just some highlights behind me, and I'm happy to talk about any of those individually or later on.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Volpe. I'll try to be as brief, but I won't make any promises. Just very briefly, again, my name is Dr. Willis, and I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi. That's a picture of my family that you see on the bottom left, and I'm the smallest one, and I like to think that I grew into my ears eventually. But I just like to always start with that just because it contextualizes why I study risk and resilience today, just growing up in a predominantly Black community, seeing some of the structural issues that led to a lot of disparities, but also seeing how Black communities and Black youth were able to be resilient in a variety of ways. And again, a lot of my work focuses on the experience of online racism and online racial discrimination. And I don't have to tell this group here how important race is to adolescent development, and how important the internet is to adolescent development, especially because we know that Hispanic and Black youth tend to spend more time online and on social media sites such as TikTok, for example, more than their white peers. But we also know that adolescence is a very critical period in which it's really important that youth develop a healthy sense of their racial identity, because we know that this healthy sense of this identity typically is associated with better psychological and overall health outcomes. And so the internet presents this kind of dual-edged sword where it can open up a lot of opportunities for youth of color to, again, build that community, have those positive experiences, but it can also place them at a higher risk for experiencing what we call online racial discrimination. And very briefly, I'm just highlighting some of the work of my colleagues and I that have explored the many ways that online racism and discrimination have impacted youth of color. So we've seen that higher or more frequent exposure to these experiences are related to increases in PTSD, anxiety symptoms, depressive symptoms, substance use, and it's also been associated with increased suicidal ideation. We also know that youth of color don't live in a digital silo. They aren't just online, and they still have to navigate those same stressors that we've all had to navigate offline, including those offline interpersonal experiences of discrimination. And we have studies to show that youth on average might report as many as 5 racist incidents a day, with most of them occurring in online context. But we also know that not all youth of color who are exposed to racism are affected by it in the same way. And racial identity beliefs, so that significance and meaning of race to one's self-concept, has been shown to actually help youth be resilient in the face of online racial discrimination. So what you see here is briefly a study where we actually found that just having more feelings of affirmation and belonging to your identity actually protected youth against some forms of online racial discrimination. And so they actually had lower levels of what we call traumatic stress symptoms, even when they did have to engage with online racist material. But where do we go from here? And so, my lab also focuses on how can we translate these findings into interventions to increase access to mental health resources for youth of color. And so I like to take a FUBU approach. And for the kids here, that used to be a clothing brand back in the 90s and 2000s, but it means for us, by us, where we really take this approach where we center Black youth and Black communities in the development of different technological interventions to help them cope with different online stressors. And just very briefly, this is really just from the Afrofuturist perspective, where we know that Black youth and youth of color in general are creative if we give them the space to allow them to co-create and iterate. They have the answers to help us help them meet some of the challenges that they're exploring today. And so very briefly, I'm going to show a couple examples of what this has looked like in my work. So here is a short intervention or a prototype of a digital intervention that we have drafted based on focus groups with Black youth and young adults. There we go. Thank you. So as you can see, and this is really informed by a lot of our work with youth and young adults, but we have provided ways for youth to self-assess their symptoms and create their own profile so they can keep track of their mental health symptoms over time. We also want to equip youth with the resources to know what is therapy and how can they talk to their parents or their family members about seeking therapy, whether, if it's time for them to seek intervention. And so after our assessments, we're using and building AI tools to actually help curate and push our culturally specific resources to teens and youth. And we're also integrating the ability to find local therapists in their communities. And then finally, in a lot of our conversations, our youth often talked about the importance of having community and talking to other teens, but not wanting those conversations to be on the typical social media platforms like TikTok or Twitter. So we also have created a siloed discussion, kind of Reddit-style community for youth, where they can talk about their own personal interests as well as experiences related to discrimination and racial identity. And so that was a very brief, just kind of introduction to that platform. And I'm excited to announce that we've received funding and our prototype will be hopefully available in the spring. That's our timeline now. So we're still working with actual Black teens and we're still iterating on the app. And again, we're centering Black youth in the development of this intervention. And another intervention that me and my team have worked on is, again, thinking about what are other ways we can increase the experience of Black joy in online spaces and kind of cultivate that resilience. And so we also, another team, we've developed a platform called JoyNet. And this was actually co-created with myself and alongside psychiatrists, social workers, and computer scientists and community-based stakeholders. One of the really cool things is, again, we centered youth in the creation of this platform, and we had a youth advisory committee. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but they talked about some of the positive sides of social media. As you can see from some of the quotes here, one team said, "I feel like when you get on TikTok, it's so many different things that you can get drawn into, and not all the time is negative. I feel like most of the time on TikTok, it's a positive outlet because you have people that you know dancing, doing different things that make them happy and bring joy to their lives. So that's why I choose TikTok." So again, really trying to think about how can we change the narrative and listen to youth of color in terms of how to leverage technology in a healthy way. But yet we also know that there is still a lot of toxicity in these online spaces. And so our youth and our committee also talked about why JoyNet and platforms like JoyNet is important, whether it's, again, wanting to avoid toxic content when they go on looking for joy or positive experiences, wanting to be able to talk about things such as grief without fear of being cyberbullied. And so, which again brought the dilemma of how can we create such a platform that can really push this type of Black joyous content, but sidestep some of the toxicity of traditional social media platforms. So again, with computer scientists, we built an AI system that's actually scraping TikTok and other places online, and it's actually informed by our youth committee and other community stakeholders, and it's able to push those videos that are deemed as positive, culturally relevant, etc. And it allows youth, again, an outlet and community to really cultivate their own sense of resilience and Black joy. And then finally, we know that this work, building interventions is only the first step, and we need a lot of systemic and policy changes. And so in our lab, we use our research to also think about how can we influence policy on local and national levels. And these are just some examples of how we've used research to just advocate for tech companies to take more responsibility in terms of protecting teens in online spaces. So again, that was not as brief as I had hoped, but hopefully it was informative. That's my contact information, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Oh, awesome. That's so cool. I have so many questions. Okay, I'm going to be very, very brief. Thank you. Okay, yes. Already done that. Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the research that we do at the center. Can everyone hear me? Is it all good? Okay. So our Teen Snapshot series we started last year. We're really excited about this series because it's our opportunity to kind of have our finger on the pulse of Gen Z and to bring those insights to the creators and the storytellers that we want to reach with our work. And so the first snapshot that we did was on the social media, Surgeon General's social media advisory in 2023. That was mentioned a little bit earlier today. So I just wanted to give an example of how we kind of capture the youth voice and represent that to the public and to our audience. And some of the findings here we found to be very interesting. So in the survey, it's very quick. The surveys are very short. They're meant to be kind of really easy, like small kind of sound bites from young people. And so we gave them or showed them a clip of the Surgeon General's statement, a little excerpt from it, and asked them if they agreed on it. And then we also asked about the potential bans on TikTok, I think in Montana, and the other was Utah at the time. And so you can see here that 52.4% of the teens who responded strongly or somewhat agree with the Surgeon General's statement. And I found that to be really interesting, or we did at the time, because it kind of emphasizes that it's not really like an us against them sort of thing, like adults against young people, trying to get young people off their phones or not to use social media. I think adolescents themselves are also very interested in protecting younger generations, protecting themselves, having some different changes in terms of how the platforms work and how they're used in their lives. And so we found that to be really important. Some of these quotes really bring that to life. I feel like the problem is that social media companies don't take any effort to censor harmful content. When done correctly, social media does help many kids socialize and improves their mental health. 16-year-old from California. So you can kind of see that we're sort of on the same page, and the conversation is a lot more nuanced. And I think everyone in this room is probably aware of that, but it's always good to have the data to back it up. Okay. Before I want to introduce this before it starts playing. So maybe I'll go back. So the second piece that I want to show you is a trailer that we came out with from a series called the Borrow My Eyes Oral History Video Series. This was a project that was funded by the Funders for Adolescent Science Translation. And we had a series of videos of pairs of best friends of young people talking about their relationships and their friendships and how they manage them both on and offline. And it turned into this really cool playlist that we have that you can check out. And there's QR codes, obviously, throughout here to find our site. But now I'll play the video.
So we're looking at this camera? No, you're looking you. Hello. I'm so nervous.
Okay. Yeah, okay, cool.
I'll go first. Hi, I'm Monse. I'm 17. I just turned 17.
The first day we became friends was honestly the first day we really met.
Oh my gosh, I love this. Okay.
Write down the strongest emotion that you can think of when you think about engagement with social media.
Stress and kind of an overwhelming feeling.
Lonely, that's a good pick. Yeah. Envy?
Really overwhelming. You're always comparing yourself to people and seeing what other people are doing.
Connection, because it really connects me to my friends.
But a lot of people lose themselves in it at times, and they forget about the people around them.
But I do think that there is a very positive impact, just being able to have this space to spread awareness about issues that you're passionate about.
Whenever social media comes up in a film or TV show with teens, it always has to be something negative.
Like they'll be walking down the street, and then they'll be on their phones.
They'll use internet lingo. That's kind of just something you say online.
They'll be like, oh my god, that's so LOL, and they don't even use it correctly. TV shows and movies are mainly written by adults, and I think what's missing from that is an actual teen experience and a teen perspective.
There's not a lot of roles filled by Mexican Americans, and when they are, it's never the main character.
There needs to be more discussion about what an actual friendship looks like.
We're tired of seeing the same characters in new bodies. I promise we are all waiting for somebody to create something new.
I'll, of course, happy to answer any questions about the research and the work that we do and some of the reports that we come out with. Our annual Teens and Screens report will be out at the end of this month on October 24th. A quick little plug there. Last year it went pretty viral. Even The Onion wrote about it, which was fun. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those presentations, and all of you have really exciting work going on. So let's get into some questions about social media and teen identity. So the first question that I want to ask is, what is the definition of an online identity or digital footprint? And when you think about having an online identity or digital footprint / profile, what does that look like?
I can take this one. So in my eyes, having your own digital footprint and I guess a trail of yourself wherever you go online is kind of like building up your own persona in a sense. Like I touched on in the last panel, a lot of what people are doing these days is kind of building their online persona very meticulously and purposefully to reflect a more idealized version of themselves or the version they hope to be and hope for others to see. So through interaction, engagement, liking posts, commenting, favoriting, stuff like that, it kind of allows your online persona or digital footprint to be an extension of yourself in the real world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a perfect answer. The other thing that it makes me think about too is that digital footprint is, like you said, the liking and kind of who you're connecting with. But now we also know that digital footprint includes, the sites that you visit or the things that you buy, and how all that data is also used to influence kind of what ads you might see in certain online spaces, which is an important thing to consider as well. And I think the interesting thing about this generation is that, when social media first came about, I think it was the opposite. People had their identities. They were probably already 17 or 18. And so that online identity was more so to match that kind of already in-person identity, where now they're both happening at the same time. So I think it's definitely a dynamic process that you all have to navigate.
And I love this because, in my view, the online persona, as you mentioned, and then as you mentioned, is both the self and is also a presentation. And we know that that's true offline too, to a certain extent. But in my view, online opens up new possibilities for better or worse, for exploration and presentation. And so when I think about identity, I think about what's being broadcast, but I also think about what is the meaning the person is making of those online experiences. So I think it's all of these things, right? How do you then, I work predominantly with young adults, and so what in this process of presenting oneself and then maybe representing oneself, changing the photos, changing the likes, presenting a certain perfect persona. Is it different? Is it similar? In that process, you're negotiating that identity online, and you're also then making meaning from that negotiation. How do people respond to you? Did you like that? Didn't you? What does that mean about how willing you are to change yourself online? Does that then translate to offline? There's so many complexities that this additional context then also allows for. So I think it's really an opportunity and can also be challenging to navigate all those different multiple roles and identities.
I think this is a really interesting question to me, because I think sometimes there's a disconnect between how adults have experienced and been introduced to social media and then how young people are on these really deep fundamental levels. Because I can remember getting a Twitter or a tagged or something, and I had no concept that I could present myself as something that I wasn't, right? It was the idea that you could have an identity that was not actually who you were, it didn't make that it wasn't a thought. But I think for young people now, that's you always think, oh, I can present myself on this platform one way, on a different platform an entirely different way. And to even just approach these digital environments with that kind of awareness, I think is interesting. You talked a little bit about the spam accounts as well. I was talking to our youth media representation program, which is our group of youth that we work with on research and things like that. And they were talking about spam accounts. And I was like, what is a spam account? They don't use Finsta anymore. That's not cool. But this idea that there are these multiple ways that you engage and present yourself online, search for things, and it's these different aspects and layers of your identity at this really critical time of identity formation, which I think is just kind of hard for older folks to really understand in some ways.
Which has been evidenced by people accidentally posting things under their spam accounts or their non-spam accounts that we've seen recently.
You don't know how
the next question that I wanted to ask is, how do youth experiences online vary even within same identity groups? So what are the different ways that youth engage in identity exploration and development online?
Yeah, so something I've noticed in my experience online as a South Asian woman is the prevalence of #brown talk on my For You page, which is the main explore page for TikTok. So basically, this culmination of videos group under this hashtag in order to reach other people who kind of interact with that content more. And it kind of tunnels you in, especially with apps like TikTok where the algorithms are so strong. It tunnels you into one specific side of TikTok, and you'll think, oh, everybody's on this side of TikTok. Everybody's consuming the media that I'm consuming, sorry. But that's couldn't be further from the truth, because especially after the pandemic, I feel there's been a disconnect in what's trending, the micro trends and the speed of the trend cycles that are happening currently, or the rise of aesthetics or sub aesthetics and things to conform to, such as that, have really just made TikTok and social media kind of isolating in a way, even within a same identity type group. So Yeah, and I feel like that's caused people like me or other students to kind of flock to other apps that they can use for themselves. Like I mentioned in the last panel, like Letterboxd or Goodreads, where they can kind of synthesize media on their own terms without having to kind of adapt and keep adapting to what's in and what's out currently. That makes sense.
Said.
One thing I'll also note, I think it was great to hear your experiences, because I was curious about, what's the youth experience with that? Because I work with young adults, I think that this question is pretty interesting. In my research, I sometimes find that young adults compared to teens, because of the transition to college, might be exploring their identity in different ways. Not that teens are not, but the ways might be different. If they are college attending, they might be engaging in an environment where they're separated from the majority of their peers that they were comfortable with, or their families, their neighborhoods that may or may not look more like them. And so when I think about identity and same identity groups, I think a lot about how Black young adults talk about using the online space in some ways to figure out and explore different Black identities. When I say Black identities, I mean across African diasporic groups. So folks who might come from an African immigrant background, connecting with folks who are Black internationally using social media and trying to figure out what does that mean as I'm attending college in a place where I don't have access to those ethnic communities that I was a part of. So I think it's also really important to think about, within same identity groups, what does that look like by other axes of identification? So it might be ethnic identities, it could be gender. Like I said, I do a lot of work specifically with Black young adult women and how their experiences might be different and how they might experience different things online from other Black folks, Black male-identified folks, or from different African diaspora groups if they're African American, and how that opens up a world, but it also means that their experiences might be especially nuanced. And so I think for any group that we might be interested in working with, we really want to think about, like, what is the personal experience? What is the cluster of experiences? We don't want to treat any group as monolithic. And I think that's a really important consideration because there are so many nuanced identity groups on social media that people are exploring.
And I'll just say, alongside that point, I think it can start as simple as, like when teens are developing or kids developing their interest, and how that can lead to widely different online experiences. So a kid that's interested in video games, they might end up being on more of the Twitch or the Discord, versus if they're interested in like makeup or content creation, they might be more on TikTok or YouTube. And this can open them up to a variety of different experiences. And when we look at those differences within group, we also kind of, like you said, look at those intersecting identities, how like some communities, even if they are hetero or homogenous or the same in one way, there might still be experiences of gendered racism or homophobia that can affect some teens with those intersecting identities. And in terms of just how kids also kind of start to explore their identity, I think the first thing is as simple as representation in these online spaces. I think there are probably very few kids like younger than 17 I've met that are actually able to say like, oh, I did this because I wanted to explore what it's like to be Black. But it's more so, I saw this person that looked like me doing this really cool thing, and that made me want to learn more. And it also made me start to think about like, oh, I can do this thing. And so that also starts to, help us think about the importance of not only having those representative kind of figures in these online spaces that are, creating content in a safe way, but also what happens when kids don't have that representation. What kind of messages are they internalizing if it's not coming from those communities with that stake in it?
Mm-hmm. All right, so my next question has two parts. So public discussions of the relationship between youth and social media suggest that social media is bad for youth and is often used as a scapegoat for youth's negative online experiences and overall well-being. So I want to kind of divide this into a question for Sustina, and then also a question for our scholars. So Sustina, what are your thoughts on social media being seen as bad? And are there ways it has been helpful or positive tool for you? And I know you talked about this earlier, but just to reiterate.
No, yeah. To like refer back to my other panel, I feel like a common phrase that a lot of kids in my generation have heard when telling their parents they have a headache or they're tired is, it's because of that damn phone. Like constantly, like you said, being used as a scapegoat for poor mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And because a life is so like holistic and very all-encompassing, it's very hard to like directly correlate poor mental health to social media or the use of technology. So helpful ways that social media has been used as a tool for me in my life have been for motivation, for example. So like a thing I do before every school year is I go on Pinterest and I make these little like vision boards to keep myself motivated throughout the year. And there's been a rise of like study motivation content on Study Talk. So things that like emphasize role models such as like Rory Gilmore, for example, who are focused on their academics, and people who want to use that as inspiration can due to social media. Another helpful factor of social media is it keeps me in touch with friends and family. And I feel like globalization, you know, happened in the 90s. Thank you, AP World. But I feel like it's very easy to lose track of just person-to-person relationships, because as like I said, I'm a South Asian person. I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants, so I have a lot of family like overseas in India, and sometimes there can be somewhat of a social disconnect. But I feel like something that me and my grandma, for example, have bonded over is like me teaching her how to FaceTime and like use Instagram and stuff like that. So that's another really helpful way I've seen it enhance my own life. Additionally, YouTube is so very helpful when it comes to school. Sometimes, like especially with the pandemic, like the way that we have intook information and been able to do our assignments in the comfort of our own home for like 2 years, it really altered our like attention spans and how we go about sitting in a classroom for like hours on end and being able to just stay engaged the whole entire time, especially now that phones have been taken away. So yeah, going home and being able to flip on a YouTube video to further explain a concept instead of like bombarding my teacher with like 30,000 emails, which you guys as professors and such I'm sure are familiar with. So yeah, YouTube. And then also it just like really makes me feel seen as a person, because so many interests, like you said, and so many different values are reflected within social media, because I feel like there's a post for just about everything. There's a hashtag for anything under the sun at this point. So I feel like every interest as a kid growing up that I've decided will be my new hyperfixation of the week has been reflected throughout social media. And I'm really thankful for those aspects of it.
Great. Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm actually going to pivot to a different question for my colleagues here. In this current socio-political moment, youth are explicitly engaging in discussions around race, gender, and other social identities that matter to them. They are also negotiating a society where there are heated debates around affirmative action and critical race theory bans, gender-neutral bathrooms, and general issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So given the current context, how are online spacing helping us to shape new narratives around diversity, equity, and inclusion that differs from pre-social media?
Go ahead.
No, please.
You sure?
Yeah.
This is kind of connected to what the other question was, I think, about like new narratives and like narrative change. And obviously, like I believe, I'm from the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. I deeply believe in storytelling. And I think it's extremely powerful to change the narrative around social media and young people. And I think it's connected to this question about the socio-political context, because I think that social media facilitates civic engagement among young people in a way that we really haven't seen before. And it's also kind of like aligning with and meeting these developmental needs, right, for like community and belonging and identity formation, and then also taking risks that are positive risks like advocacy, and kind of protesting and things like that, and engaging with others in that kind of work. And so I think the context where these things are, one, being highlighted through social media, but then also providing avenues for young people to get involved, and then also to shape their own kind of view of themselves and make meaning of the world around them through civic engagement, is a really powerful story to tell about social media that we can do a lot more of.
Oh, you said what I was going to say, but 10 times better. No, but you said it 10 times better, so I'm happy you went. The only other thing I'll add is I think our charge as, I won't say older, but the next generation over is to think about how can we support youth in these online spaces, because this work it's a lot of work, and it is taxing, and it can take a toll. And so, our charge is to also think of what supports can we put in place to help these youth in these contexts.
Okay, great. So in our last couple of minutes, I have one more question for you all, and that is, what barriers still exist? What barriers have you encountered in supporting youth in navigating digital spaces?
I'll just say quickly, one challenge that I've encountered is that some places, some schools, some colleges and universities have explicit support in the form of curricula or programs that encourage and empower youth to think critically about media, and others don't. So some, that might be baked in. I don't know if I would be interested for the youth if they have something like that, like media, literacy, critical media education that really centers equity as well, and can help youth understand some of the behind the scenes of how this technology is working. Who is it working for? Who's in charge of it? What's the profits? What's the surveillance risks? Such that, policies can also be made to help protect on the back end as youth are actually, navigating the social media space. So I think one of the biggest challenges is not that you don't know how to make sense of this environment, but they're not given the tools and the guidance early enough. And they might be receiving it at school or at home or neither or both. But that's not a part of our at writ large education system, in my view, and we're all grappling with that, not just youth, right? I came from North Carolina, and we just had Helene, and they're talking about misinformation on social media about who has, is FEMA there, is FEMA not there, where's the resource, and they're having to say this is hugely problematic for people actually getting the resources. So it's not just youth; we all need supports for this, and so that's one of the biggest challenges that I see, is that there's not enough of that, of those tools to help support that critical media literacy.
Thank you. So we're now going to transition into our post-panel discussion. And so at your tables, you'll be answering 2 discussion questions. The first one is, how do we support youth in these digital/social media spaces for their benefit and safety, or their mental health? And the second question is, what resources do you have and what resources do you need to help youth navigate digital spaces for their mental well-being and safety? And so at your tables, you'll write down your thoughts or your responses to these questions on these large Post-it notes, and then we'll share back after 30 minutes.
Hopefully you elected your spokesperson to chat with us, but we're going to take the next few minutes before lunch to kind of share out what did you all talk about. And just a quick reminder to my panelists on this panel, can you please come back up here after we do our discussion, because we need to take a picture. All right, I'll remind you again before we break for lunch. All right, so any table want to be brave and start. Get us set up. What can we learn from you today? Oh yes, we love when the students start. Here's one right here.
So, supporting youth in these digital and social spaces. So, what can we do? I think, first of all, like I said earlier, it really is about the parent to child dinner table conversations. What you talk about is really crucial, I think, in supporting youth, especially as they're entering middle school, going into their freshman year of high school. Oftentimes, you're starting to finally navigate social media for the first time. I know for my own younger sister, who's about 6 years younger than me, she first got on social media when she was probably in 8th grade, and it just became a bigger factor in her life. And she would talk to me about all the change that it's an interesting time for middle schoolers, because suddenly you start to see your friends' stories and how they're changing, and kind of all at once you're like, wait, this kid that I used to play Roblox with is suddenly smoking and posting up on their story, what? And she was having a really rough time with them specifically. So that's one of the things that we put for that answer.
So those dinner table conversations, continuing to still have those supports at home. Okay, love that. Thank you for that suggestion. Who's next? I know there's some juicy nuggets out here. I listen to these tables.
Okay. Do I answer both questions right now?
You can answer both,
okay.
One or either. It's up to you. What
Cool.
did y'all talk about?
Okay, so this amazing table of people got some really good nuggets of information. To think about how we might support young people in, using these digital social media, spaces for their benefit. We thought about developing criteria to evaluate the quality of content that they're interacting with, and us as adults modeling responsibility, being really approachable, and sharing out our history of how we came here with technology and how we might instill this and share some knowledge and help them kind of navigate these future spaces. I think we also discussed how we need to think more systemically. A lot of this falls on individuals, and they might feel a lot of pressure navigating this alone. So thinking about how schools, parents, communities, and even at the state and federal level, how we might come together to create more community, more, as we talked about, maybe finding ways for in-person spaces to be competitive in how exciting it is as compared to online spaces. So it's difficult to compare, but maybe making it more exciting so they're able to join and do that. Digital literacy, co-creation, and really including youth's voices and perspectives, and not just in brainstorming and ideating, but also in decision making and having them kind of be leaders at the table. What resources do we have, or do we need to help young people navigate their digital spaces? We thought about how to navigate age-appropriate content and what is one of them? Code switching in schools. So a lot of information that they see online, it may not be appropriate for schools, and how do we navigate that? How can we support educators? What do they need to make this happen? Because a lot of pressure falls on them. And these are really young kids that are bringing in stuff that they're not even aware is inappropriate maybe until it comes to schools and until it goes to peers. And so creating spaces for young people, educators, parents, where they can just interact, have safe spaces, have trusting spaces and people that they can talk to. And really just last point, exposure to diverse ideas so we can reduce feeling like we're in a bubble and we're all just bringing the same perspective. Having diverse ideas that can contrast each other is important. And so we can have an intergenerational dialogue that's not falling into groupthink or what is the word? I don't remember. But yeah, something along those lines. That was a lot of notes, but it was a great conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of y'all.
Yeah. So lots of great nuggets in there, but one of the things I heard even across tables is thinking about how do we help scaffold youth engagement into this media? How do we create ratings or systems that help them to say, which is giving you truth, more or less truth than others, things like that. So lots of great nuggets there. Other tables. Y'all had juicy stuff. I know it. I was listening to you. We got one back here.
Okay, I'm going to try to be quick. We had a lot of great nuggets as well. Something that we talked about was continuously engaging with youth, talking to them about what they think we can do to support their well-being through social media and digital technology. That self-reflection piece we thought was really important, and we thought, wow, when we were listening to the youth talking about how intentional they were being about reflecting on how they were using social media, we were all wow, we could really use that practice as well. So helping adults do the same exact thing that youth are asking us to help them do. We also talked about how a lot of times we hear that youth are finding spaces online that they don't have in person, and thinking about why our contexts in the year of 2024 are like driving youth to seek community online instead of in person, and these really inhumane policies that we're enforcing in schools in a lot of states. Let's see what else. And we also talked about like the difference between teaching students to code in classrooms is not the same as teaching students how to navigate a digital society. So like, yes, teaching to code is really important for like job prospects, but it's not the same as helping youth navigate things that might be misinformation online or how to be in an online society. Anything else? And I think that wraps the main points up. Thanks.
See a couple other hands. There's blue right here, and then one more.
Hi, we talked about how at the Y we have teen clubs, and how our clubs, they are youth-based, and the teens take responsibility of our IG account. As well as like the band account we use. And we take them through a media training with our media director so that they're able to understand how to navigate it. And they're also looking at other programs that are ran by other teens within our Y community so that they're always in a positive light with other teens that are in their age realm. So we also talked about giving them spaces, not just digitally, but also giving them a third place so that they can talk to one another and they can help one another with their mental well-being.
Really hearing this theme about this interaction between the in-person and the digital, and how can we bring these two together more often. Great. Other thoughts? Y'all have more, I know you did.
Thanks. Our table kind of dug a little bit more into the storytelling and kind of self-expression pieces that we're seeing through media, and similar to what others are saying, like finding physical spaces for self-expression and self-discovery. So I think one of the things that struck me in the first panel was that young people are kind of creating their personas and developing their interests through social media. And I think, how can we curate those spaces offline, right? And I come from an arts background, so the first thing I thought of was, well, these programs are getting cut in schools, right? And so how can we kind of like curate a space for young people to express themselves in real life with other people in a space rather than only online, right? So if we limit their self-expression in schools, then they're going to express themselves in other ways. And if that's online, it can be done in a healthy way, but we also, I think, should facilitate other healthy ways of self-expression. So that was something we talked about. We also touched on kind of the digital and media literacy, social emotional learning, and maybe the we in this, how do we support youth? Like, what does that mean, right? Does it mean this community? Does it mean policymakers? Does it mean teachers or parents? Kind of like grappling with that. And we did say some responsibility falls on policymakers and social media companies as well. Let me see. I think that's kind of, anything else we want to add from here? No. I think that's kind of what others haven't touched on quite yet. So.
I love the comment about thinking about who are the stakeholders and how are they moving beyond just parents and the children involved, right? There's a whole systemic level in which all the way up to the policymakers that should be invested in this work. One right there.
Okay. We kind of went with talking about like the actual tools and skills with regards to social media. So one comment I really liked from this table is we should be trusting the youth as the experts in this regard and empowering them and guiding them. But I think to do that, everybody has to be media literate and know how the different platforms and tools work. So like Did you know that you can block people? Did you know that you can hide hashtag Taylor Swift or whatever? Just kind of knowing how those systems work, and then also like the proper etiquette, right? Like those are kind of like unwritten norms and like behaviors. Like, what does that look like? And then kind of on the other side here, therapy. So like modeling behavior for youth, like how should adults model proper behavior when it comes to social media and just everyday life? And so like, I'm sure everybody has met someone who's on social media and it just really affects them in a negative way. And, and then just pointing out like, hey, maybe you should talk about that with someone and get some proper therapy. Because it can negatively affect adults and youth. And then we kind of talked like a little more in depth about like, access to mental health. Like it's widely available now more so than ever, but there are also still barriers when it comes to like cost and, the family dynamic of being like, wow, you don't need therapy, it's fine. So, I mean, there's still that aspect as well. So we kind of like, and also like whether, even trying to find mental health resources, whether the information's accurate or not. Psychology today, a lot of the information may or may not be accurate. So you have that barrier too. So I think it'd be nice to streamline some of this a little bit. Maybe it'd be nice if there was a crash course for social media, its etiquette and why, something that's widely available and well known. I think that could be a good start too.
I love the emphasis on the tools and thinking about us adults in the room educating ourselves on how to use these things, right? Which can be hard because it's like, I'm also trying to get everybody in the room to live. Like I'm trying to fund your lifestyle. I'm trying to be a parent. I'm trying to be the teacher, all that stuff. But if we don't understand the tools that our students, that our kids are using, then how can we expect to support them as they kind of grow in this social media age? We probably have time for like one more table. One last table over. Is there a hand that I can't see by this column? Yeah, these two columns are rough, y'all, so I can't see you if you're in the corner.
All right, so first, I'm not gonna have all like the professional lingo, right? So bear with me. But at this table, I think one of the things we really focused on, being that we work directly hands-on with a lot of our youth, who in most cases are court-involved youth, is recognizing that social media is here to stay, and for us as practitioners, that we are just having to have a greater understanding of the the affirming apps, the positive apps, like extracting that and not seeing social media in a whole as a negative thing. In the cases we are referred, a lot of our youth have come to us because of improper use of apps, right? So like learning those affirming apps that some of the team panel was talking about, and just knowing how to even find those. So I think one of the things we were saying as a resource is we call it like a street sheet of like just apps or anything that we can have to know like these are the affirming apps that teens are using or engaged in. And then also for me, it was like, how do we even know what's trending, right? How do we know what they're engaged in? Like, how, are we like months behind or years behind in the information that they have? So like, how do we stay current? And that's just living like purposefully fostering healthy experiences and conversations with our youth, and embedding, implementing those programming or social media into our programming. So with one of our programs, KUP, that's being led by Latar, it's a community attention youth internship program where we are trying our best to now like engage in our social media with our Instagram and highlighting our youth involvement and work that they're doing and having them like lead that as well. So I think just knowing and having access to apps, being in the know with our youth is a really big thing.
Absolutely. I think that one of the big things that we often forget is like we have to stay consistently engaged with the youth. So it's like they teach us one thing and I was like, ooh, I just learned this one thing and I got it. But you have to stay consistent in your engagement in order to figure out what's current, because the thing that you just learned is probably like out of date like 2 weeks later, right? So just staying constantly engaged with this work.